Be me Callum, 27 years old. I have a degree in software engineering, and I'm genuinely good at my job. I'm not some rock star coder, just a solid, reliable guy who gets things done. For the past 6 months, my life has been a miserable cycle of job hunting. It feels less like a career search and more like shouting into a void. I'd spend hours tailoring my resume for each position, writing a cover letter that hit all the right keywords. I'd research the company, understand their tech stack, and make sure my application was as perfect as possible. Then I'd hit submit and wait. Most of the time, the response was just silence. Complete and total radio silence. Sometimes I'd get the automated rejection email. You know the one. Thank you for your interest in our company. The worst part was when it would arrive less than 2 minutes after applying. It was obvious a machine had scanned my resume for a few seconds and tossed it into the digital trash bin. No human eyes ever saw my experience or my projects. I must have sent out over 200 applications. My spreadsheet was a monument to my own failure. Out of all that effort, I landed maybe 5 or 6 interviews for jobs I wasn't even excited about. It was starting to seriously get to me. The constant rejection, the feeling of being invisible. There was this one company, though, Innovate Dynamics. For me, it was the dream job. They worked on projects that were genuinely interesting, the kind of stuff you could be proud of. The pay was good, the benefits were solid, and it was the exact career path I wanted. I was a perfect fit for them. I knew it. My skills aligned perfectly with at least 5 different openings they had posted over the last few months. Senior developer, systems analyst, back-end engineer, you name it. I applied for every single one, and every single time, without fail, I got that same instant rejection email. It was baffling. I felt like I was going crazy. One night, I was out for a drink with my buddy Johnny. He's one of my oldest friends, and he works as a recruiter for a big tech firm. He knows the ins and outs of the corporate hiring world. I was venting to him, probably for the 10th time, about how demoralizing this whole process was. I told him about Innovate Dynamics and the instant rejections. He just nodded, listening patiently while sipping his beer. He pulled out his phone while I was talking and started scrolling. He typed the company name into LinkedIn. "Let's take a look," he said, his eyes scanning the screen. "Okay, look at their recent hires, the posts they make welcoming new team members." He turned the phone around to show me. It was a wall of corporate headshots, a lot of women, all smiling. The men they did hire all looked incredibly young, almost like they were fresh out of college, and fit a very specific, non-threatening aesthetic. It didn't look like a team of experienced engineers. It looked like a cast for a TV show. "Now look at this," he said, tapping on a profile. The screen showed a woman with a very professional photo and a title that read, Katie, Director of People and Culture. Her bio was filled with corporate buzzwords, championing diversity, fostering inclusive environments, empowering marginalized voices. She had a post pinned to the top of her profile. It was a long rant about the importance of breaking down traditional power structures in the workplace and combating inherent male toxicity. Johnny looked up from his phone with a knowing, tired expression. "This is your problem right here," he said, pointing at Katie's smiling face. "You're a man named Callum. Your resume probably gets filtered out by an algorithm she personally approved before it ever reaches a real person." I was just staring at the screen. I couldn't believe it. "That can't be real," I said. "That has to be illegal. They're supposed to hire the most qualified person." Johnny let out a short, bitter laugh. "They don't care about the most qualified person," he explained. "They care about the candidate that helps them meet their diversity quotas. It's all about optics. Your qualifications are secondary to your demographics." He told me that these days, many big companies use software to screen resumes, and HR can set parameters to prioritize certain keywords or filter out others. Words related to diversity, inclusion, and empowerment get a boost. A name like Callum combined with a traditional career path in engineering. It was probably a red flag for her system. I just sat there, feeling this wave of hopelessness wash over me. All my hard work, my skills, my experience, none of it mattered because of my name and my gender. It was the most profoundly unfair thing I had ever encountered. Johnny saw the look on my face. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, man, you can either complain about the game or you can learn how to play it. You want to work there, right? I nodded. Then you have to get past the dragon guarding the gate, he said, gesturing to his phone. We need to make you look like a candidate she wants to interview. The idea felt wrong, dishonest. But what was the alternative? 6 more months of automated rejections? I was desperate. I had bills to pay. I wanted a career, not just a job. What do you have in mind? I asked. A slow grin spread across Johnny's face. We spent the next hour brainstorming. We went back to my place and pulled up my resume on the laptop. The plan was to create a new version of it, a sanitized version. First, the name. Callum had to go. We looked up lists of gender-neutral names. We settled on Alex. Simple, common, impossible to assign a gender to without more information. Next, we went through my experience in education. I had mentioned being part of the university's rugby club. Too aggressive, too masculine, Johnny said. So we deleted it. I had a link to my GitHub profile, which had a picture of me. We removed the link. I had listed some of my personal projects, one of which was a simulation for a fantasy football league. Delete it, Johnny advised. Too bro-I. We scrubbed the entire document of anything that could possibly identify me as a man. The final result was a sterile, impersonal document. It listed my skills, my qualifications, and my work history. Nothing more. It was the resume of a ghost, a highly competent, well-educated ghost. There, Johnny said, leaning back. Now you're not Callum, the male engineer. You're Alex, the qualified candidate. It felt bizarre, like I was applying for a job in disguise. But a part of me was morbidly curious to see if it would work. I found the same back-end engineer position on their website, the one I'd been rejected from just a week prior. With a deep breath, I uploaded the new resume of Alex. I filled out the application, leaving any optional demographic questions blank. Then I clicked Submit. I expected the same instant rejection. I braced myself for it, but it didn't come. Minutes turned into an hour, still nothing. No news is good news, Johnny said before he left. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I woke up and checked my email with a sense of dread. And there it was, an email from Innovate Dynamics. My heart sank. I thought, here we go again. But the subject line was different. It wasn't a rejection. It read, Invitation to interview for back-end engineer position. I clicked it open, my hands shaking slightly. It was from a real person, an HR assistant. Dear Alex, it began, thank you for your interest in Innovate Dynamics. We were very impressed with your background and would like to schedule a technical interview with our team lead. I read the email 3 times to make sure it was real. It worked. The stupid, simple, dishonest trick actually worked. A part of me was thrilled. I had beaten the system. But another, much larger part of me was just sad and angry. It proved Johnny was right. They hadn't wanted me. They wanted a profile that fit their checklist. I scheduled the interview for a few days later. It was going to be a video call. I spent the next couple of days preparing, brushing up on algorithms and system design. I was nervous, but also determined. If they were going to give me a chance based on a lie, I was going to prove I deserved it based on the truth of my skills. The day of the interview arrived. I logged into the video call a few minutes early. A man joined the call. He looked to be in his early 50s, with gray hair and a serious, no-nonsense expression on his face. His name on the screen just said Tech Lead. He didn't waste any time with small talk. "Hello, Alex. Let's get started," he said, his voice gravelly. For the next hour, he absolutely grilled me. He threw complex coding problems at me, asked deep-dive questions about system architecture, and presented hypothetical scenarios that required on-the-spot problem-solving. It was one of the most challenging interviews I'd ever had, but I knew my stuff. I was in my element. I walked him through my thought process, whiteboarded the code, and explained the trade-offs of different approaches. As the interview went on, I could see his stern expressions soften slightly. He would nod occasionally, a small sign of approval. At the end of the hour, he leaned back in his chair. "Okay," he said, a hint of relief in his voice. That was good. Finally, someone who can actually do the job. He told me that HR would be in touch to schedule the next step, a cultural fit interview. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. I had passed the real test. The next day, I got another email scheduling the second interview. This one was with Katie herself. I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. This was the final boss. I joined the video call, my heart pounding. Katie appeared on the screen. She looked exactly like her LinkedIn photo, with a bright, forced corporate smile. The smile faltered for just a fraction of a second when she saw me. I could see the flicker of surprise and disappointment in her eyes. She had clearly been expecting someone else, a woman, probably, but she recovered quickly, the plastic smile snapping back into place. "Hello, Alex. So good to finally meet you," she said, her voice overly cheerful. Her interview was the complete opposite of the one with the tech lead. She didn't ask a single question about my skills or experience. Her questions were all vague, corporate speak. How do you see yourself contributing to a culture of inclusivity here at Innovate Dynamics? Can you describe a time you challenged a non-inclusive viewpoint in a professional setting? What does creating a safe space in the workplace mean to you? It was a minefield. I knew that any answer I gave could be misinterpreted. I gave the most boring, generic, non-committal answers I could think of. I used words like collaboration, respect, and open dialogue. I talked about valuing diverse perspectives and listening to my colleagues. I was basically reciting the corporate gospel back to her. I could tell she wasn't impressed. She wanted me to confess to some kind of past wrongdoing or demonstrate my allegiance to her specific ideology, but she couldn't find any fault in my answers. They were too perfect, too bland. At the end, she asked if I had any questions for her. I asked a couple of safe questions about team structure and project goals. "Well, thank you for your time, Alex," she said, her smile looking strained. "We'll be in touch." I logged off the call, feeling drained. I was sure I had blown it. She clearly didn't like me. I figured that was the end of the road. She would find a reason to veto my candidacy. 2 days went by, and I heard nothing. I started applying for other jobs again, assuming the dream was dead. Then, on a Friday afternoon, an email popped up. The subject line was, "Offer of Employment, Innovate Dynamics." I stared at it in disbelief. I opened it, and there it was. A formal offer letter with a starting salary that was even better than I had hoped for. I had done it. I was in. I found out later that the tech lead had pushed for me. He had apparently gone to his own boss and said that I was the most qualified candidate they had interviewed in a year, and if HR didn't hire me, he was going to escalate the issue. Faced with pressure from the engineering department, Katie had no choice but to approve the offer. My first day was surreal. I walked into the office, got my badge with the name Alex on it, and was shown to my desk. The tech lead came over, shook my hand firmly, and introduced me to the team. There were about 10 people in the department. I was introduced to a few other new guys who had started in the last couple of months. They all seemed like normal, competent dudes. We spent the first week getting onboarded, setting up our systems, and getting familiar with the codebase. It was challenging, but exciting. The work was exactly as interesting as I had hoped. About a week in, I went to lunch with 3 of the other guys from my team. We were just making small talk, complaining about the terrible coffee in the break room. One of the guys, a sharp guy named James, chuckled. "At least the coffee is better than dealing with our HR dragon," he said under his breath. We all kind of laughed nervously. "Yeah, that cultural fit interview was something else," another guy, Mark, added. "I felt like I was defending a thesis on a topic I'd never studied." I decided to take a small risk. "Tell me about it," I said. I'm pretty sure she was disappointed I wasn't actually a woman named Alex. The 3 of them stopped eating and just looked at me. There was a moment of silence. Then James started to laugh, a genuine deep laugh. "No way," he said, shaking his head. "You too?" It all came out right there at the lunch table. James's real name was James. He had been rejected twice before applying as Jamie. Mark had removed his entire military service history from his resume after his first application was ghosted. He reapplied and got an interview the next day. The third guy, David, had done the same thing I did, changed his name to the gender-neutral Cameron. We were all just staring at each other, a mix of shock and morbid amusement on our faces. We had all independently discovered the same secret password to get into the company. It wasn't about being qualified. It was about getting past Katie's ideological filter. From that day on, the 4 of us formed a sort of unspoken alliance. We were the deplorables who had snuck through the gates. We worked hard, helped each other out, and kept our heads down. We never spoke about it again in the open, but we all knew. It was our shared secret, a silent joke against the absurd system we had been forced to navigate, and we were determined to be the best damn engineers in the whole company. The next few months were probably the best of my professional life. Our team just clicked. With 4 new, highly motivated engineers, we started tearing through the project backlog. There was this one massive feature that had been stuck in development hell for almost a year. The original code was a mess, and no one wanted to touch it. The tech lead assigned it to me and James. We spent a week just mapping out the old system. Then we decided to scrap most of it and rebuild it from the ground up. It was intense work, long hours, but we were making real progress. The tech lead was ecstatic. He was a pure engineer at heart. He loved seeing a broken system get fixed. He started shielding us from all the corporate nonsense. If another department needed something, he handled it. If there was a pointless meeting, he'd go himself and let us keep coding. He just wanted us to do what he hired us to do, build good software. Our productivity went through the roof. We hit every deadline, and then we started finishing tasks ahead of schedule. Even the CEO, Mr. Hill, started to notice. He was an older guy, very much from the old school of business. He cared about one thing, results. He sent out a company-wide email one afternoon, specifically praising our department for the turnaround on the big project. It felt good to be recognized for the work we were doing, but not everyone was happy about it. We started noticing Katie more often. She'd walk through our section of the office, not saying anything, just observing. She had this tight, polite smile on her face, but her eyes were cold and analytical. She was watching us. Then came the quarterly all-hands meeting. Mr. Hill gave his usual speech about profits and projections. Then he handed the floor to Katie for her People and Culture update. She put up a presentation full of colorful charts and graphs. It was all about the company's diversity and inclusion metrics. She talked about all the new initiatives she had launched. As she was talking, she put up a slide showing the demographic breakdown of new hires by department. When she got to the engineering department, she paused for a second. The chart showed a noticeable spike in the male category for the last quarter. Our hiring had thrown off her perfect statistics. She didn't comment on it directly, but she had this flash of irritation in her eyes before she quickly moved to the next slide. Me and the guys all exchanged a quick, subtle glance. We knew what she was seeing. We were a statistical anomaly she couldn't explain. After that meeting, things started to change. The atmosphere shifted. Katie started scheduling random check-ins with people in our department, not with us, but with the other team members, the ones who had been there for years. We'd see them go into a conference room with her for half an hour, and when they came out, they'd look uncomfortable and avoid eye contact with us. It was obvious she was digging for information, trying to find some complaint, some evidence of the toxic environment she probably suspected we were creating. But there was nothing to find. We were just doing our jobs. We were polite, professional, and we were helping everyone succeed. The tech lead noticed what was happening. One afternoon, he called the four of us into his office. He closed the door and told us to just keep our heads down and focus on the work. He said that HR was going through some internal audits and that we shouldn't worry about it. He told us he was happy with our performance, and that was all that mattered. It was clear he was trying to protect us. He knew Katie was on a witch hunt. A couple of weeks later, the other shoe dropped. Mark sent a message to our private group chat. It was a screenshot from his profile on the company's internal hiring portal. It showed his original, rejected application. The status had been updated. It now said, "Viewed by Katie." I immediately logged in and checked my own. Same thing. My old application, the one from Callum, had been viewed that same morning. She had found us. She must have gone back through the rejection logs and found our original resumes. The names were different, but the work history, the project descriptions, it would have been an identical match. She knew we had reapplied under new names. We spent the rest of the day in a state of quiet panic. We knew a confrontation was coming. We just didn't know when or how. The call came the next morning, a calendar invitation from Katie. The subject was Project Team Performance Review. The attendees were me, James, Mark, and David, and the tech lead, and Mr. Hill. This was it, the public execution. We walked into the main conference room. It was one of those big glass-walled rooms on the executive floor. Katie was already there, sitting at the head of the long table. She had a laptop open and a stack of printed papers next to her. She looked incredibly smug, like a cat that had finally cornered a mouse. Mr. Hill was at the other end of the table, his expression completely unreadable. The tech lead sat with us, looking grim and angry. We all sat down without a word. The silence was suffocating. Katie cleared her throat and began. She said she had called the meeting to discuss a serious breach of integrity within the engineering department. She then proceeded to lay out her entire investigation. She put our original resumes up on the big screen, next to our current employee profiles. She dramatically highlighted the different names. She spoke about how we had maliciously and deceptively circumvented the company's hiring protocols. She used phrases like unethical behavior and a fundamental betrayal of trust. She painted us as a gang of criminals who had lied and cheated our way into the company. Her tone was righteous and indignant. She was performing for Mr. Hill, expecting him to be shocked and appalled. We just sat there and took it. There was nothing to say. We had done exactly what she was accusing us of. After her 10-minute monologue, she sat back, a triumphant look on her face. "So," she said, looking directly at Mr. Hill, "as you can see, this is an unacceptable situation. I recommend immediate termination for all 4 of these individuals." Mr. Hill didn't react. He just looked down the table at the tech lead. "What's your take on this?" he asked, his voice calm. The tech lead took a deep breath. He didn't look at Katie. He looked at Mr. Hill. He started by saying that he didn't condone dishonesty, but then he started talking about the state of his department before we arrived. He talked about the missed deadlines, the buggy software, the low morale. He described it as a sinking ship. Then he opened his own laptop and connected it to the screen. He pulled up a dashboard full of performance metrics, code commits, bug fix rates, project velocity charts, server uptime percentages. Every single graph showed a dramatic, undeniable improvement, starting exactly when we were hired. "This is the work these four have done in the last 6 months," the tech lead said, his voice firm and steady. "The project we were just praised for? It's 6 weeks ahead of schedule. Our system's crash rate is down by 80%. Client satisfaction has never been higher." He turned off the screen and looked back at Mr. Hill. "I don't know what protocols they circumvented," he said, "but the people who showed up for work have been the most productive and effective engineers I've managed in years. If these are the kinds of people your system is designed to filter out, Katie, then your system is broken." It was a stunning defense. He hadn't made it about us. He had made it about the work, about the results. Katie was speechless. Her smug expression had vanished, replaced by one of disbelief. She clearly expected the tech lead to fall in line. Mr. Hill was silent for a long moment, just steepling his fingers and looking from Katie to the tech lead. Finally, he turned his gaze to Katie. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension in the room like a knife. "Let me see if I understand this correctly, Katie," he began slowly. "You implemented a hiring system. This system received applications from several highly qualified candidates." He gestured toward us. "Your system automatically rejected them, without any human review. These same candidates, realizing the system was flawed, changed a single variable, their name, and resubmitted their identical qualifications. Your system then accepted them. They passed a rigorous technical interview, and they have since become the highest performing members of their department, saving a critical company project in the process." He leaned forward slightly. "And your conclusion is that the fault lies with the candidates and not with the system you designed that actively prevented us from hiring the best talent." The logic was brutal. It was undeniable. He had completely dismantled her entire argument in a few calm sentences. That's when Katie lost it. Her professional mask just crumbled away. Her face went red, and her voice started to get shrill. She started talking about how he didn't understand, that it wasn't just about performance, it was about equity and creating a just workplace. She said that by hiring us, the tech lead was perpetuating a culture of male toxicity and privilege. She accused him of not being a team player and of undermining her vision for the company. She was no longer making a business argument. It was a purely ideological tirade. She was basically having a meltdown in front of the CEO. Mr. Hill just sat there and listened, his expression unchanging. When she finally ran out of steam, sputtering about the patriarchy, he let the silence hang in the air for a few seconds. Then he spoke. "Thank you for your perspective, Katie," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Your employment with Innovate Dynamics is terminated, effective immediately. Please have your things cleared out within the hour." The shock on Katie's face was absolute. She just stared at him, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. She had been so certain of her victory. She couldn't comprehend that she had just been fired. Mr. Hill stood up. "This meeting is over." He looked at us. "Gentlemen, please see me in my office in 5 minutes." Then he walked out of the room without a second glance at Katie. We all just sat there for a second, stunned. Then we got up and walked out, leaving Katie alone in the big glass room. In Mr. Hill's office, the atmosphere was completely different. He told us to sit down. He apologized for what he called a failure in our process. He said that a company's hiring system should be designed to find the best talent, period. He told us that he was personally instructing the IT department to change our names in the system back to our real ones. He looked at me. "We're glad to have you here, Callum," he said, "not Alex." He shook each of our hands and told us to get back to work. That was it. No probation, no warnings. It was over. That night, I met Johnny for a drink at the same bar. I told him the whole story, from the meeting to Katie's firing. He just listened, a slow smile spreading across his face. When I was finished, he raised his glass. So, you had to pretend to be a genderless, personality-free applicant to get a job you were perfect for, proved you were the best, and got the person who tried to block you fired in the process, he summarized. I nodded. What a time to be alive, he said, and we clinked our glasses together. Walking home that night, I didn't feel triumphant or heroic. I just felt tired. We hadn't done anything special. We were just four guys who wanted to do our jobs. We had been forced to play a stupid game, and we had won. But it was a game we should have never been forced to play in the first place.